The floor of Ora Market was polished to a mirror shine. Italian marble gleamed with a sheen of moisture, reflecting rows upon rows of organic products. Tricolor quinoa crisps, cold-pressed pomegranate juice, almond butter, labeled from family farms. The scent of bergamot from the essential oil diffusers mixed with the slow drift of toasted bread in the air, a calculated invitation to shop. The honey-hued lighting was calibrated to exactly 2700K, warm enough to feel intimate, bright enough to make customers forget the price tags. Shopping cart wheels glided silently, not a squeak to be heard. In the middle of this consumer paradise, a janitor in a faded indigo uniform, name tag reading J, moved slowly, almost invisibly. No one realized the man was Julian Croft, the very founder of this empire. No TV cameras, no film crew. Only one purpose: to verify if the rumors of a spiritual burnout among staff were true. Because if they were, the pending merger with the third largest retail chain in America would be scrapped. And the company's proudest creation, the Nexus HR management AI system, would be called into question. The floor scrubber hummed steadily. Julian said nothing. His ears were sharper than the store's sensors. Everything was perfect. Until a sound slipped through the silence. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a cry. It was a fracture in the air. A whisper cracking apart. He stopped. Behind checkout lane, 4 Maya Washington stood with her back turned, her shoulders slightly trembling. One hand covered her ear, the other clenched her phone. Her voice barely held together, threaded through a desperate attempt at silence. "No, Mom. I'm not giving up. I promise. It's just... I don't know how much longer I can keep lying to you that everything's okay." Silence. A long breath. Then the call ended. Just seconds later, the young woman turned back to the waiting customer. Her facial muscles shifted like muscle memory. The corners of her lips curled upward. Her eyes caught the artificial light from above. A smile was formed, not felt. "Hello there. Today we have a special promotion on premium mixed nuts." Julian stood frozen behind the floor scrubber. He had written thousands of lines of code to create a system built on perfect fairness. An algorithm with no bias, no emotion, no error. But he hadn't accounted for that kind of smile. It didn't show up in performance reports. It wasn't plotted on productivity graphs. It didn't register on any of Nexus's sensors. Only a human could hear it. A crack. Something breaking. Julian looked at Maya, then glanced around. The store was still operating like a flawless machine. But in his mind, the first question echoed, soft but impossible to ignore. How many people here are smiling like that? Julian used to believe in absolutes. He wasn't just a CEO. He was a brilliant programmer, a man who dreamed of a world where data would liberate people from bias. And at one point, he truly believed he was saving the world from prejudice and chaos. Returning to the small rental room where he was staying during his undercover mission, Julian opened his laptop and stared at the old Nexus interface, the same screen he had once unveiled on stage to the world, like a technological evangelist. The screen faded into memory. Cold, white stage lights. Hundreds of people are clapping below. Julian stepped out in a silver-gray suit that hugged his lean frame, his eyes gleaming with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just software. This is a revolution. Nexus is the first HR management system to eliminate all human subjectivity. No more bias. No more emotions clouding decisions. Nexus operates on one metric only: performance." Behind him, the massive LED screen displayed simulation algorithms, graphs, color codes, chains of productivity heartbeats. The audience applauded, as if witnessing the launch of the first iPhone. One older man in the back row did not clap. His name was Martin Reyes, former head of human resources, now retired. He was the first person to give Julian an internship at the old firm back when Julian was just a tech-obsessed white college student who believed in logic above all else. After the presentation, Martin pulled Julian aside. His voice was deep and slow, like a life lesson long buried by time. Julian, people are not numbers. A single mother who stays up all night caring for her sick child. Nexus will record that as a drop in productivity. But in truth, that's courage. That's responsibility. That's something no machine can read. Julian let out a polite chuckle. With all due respect, Martin, emotions create inconsistency. Data doesn't lie. Martin shook his head, his eyes tinged with sadness. You don't see it now, but you'll start to hear it when those voices begin to echo through the cracks in your system. When that happens, don't look away. The laptop screen snapped back to the present. Julian sat silently. The memory echoed like a distant bell. The air in the room was heavy like a layer of dust no one bothered to clean. The fluorescent light flickered wearily. Nexus's interface still displayed daily performance reports. Julian closed his eyes, but instead of numbers, he heard Maya's voice. I don't know how much longer I can keep lying to Mom that everything's okay. He opened his eyes and quickly typed a few commands to access Maya's profile. A status line appeared under review due to irregular attendance, a charge delivered by an anonymous machine. Julian sat up straight. In his chest stirred an unfamiliar sensation, a crack forming in his own faith. A thought flickered swift and sharp, like a bell struck, but quickly muffled. If Martin was right, then I've been wrong in the worst possible way. The next morning, Aura Market opened as usual. Gentle piano music played in the background. Customers entered with reusable bags embroidered with the slogan, "Sustainability First." The displays were arranged with showroom precision, as if plucked from the pages of an interior design magazine. But for Julian, still in the role of Jay the janitor, this was no longer a store. It was a battlefield, and Maya Washington stood at the center of it, unaware that she was under attack. Julian kept his distance close enough to observe without drawing attention. Maya had just clocked in when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and her face stiffened. The nursing home. She moved quickly toward the break room, pulling out her phone as she walked. The call lasted less than 2 minutes, but it was long enough for the ceiling camera to record. And that very camera was a node of Nexus. Julian slipped into the storage room where an internal terminal was linked to the monitoring system. He logged in using the temporary tech access he'd assigned himself the day before. A chart appeared, orange shifting to red. Flagged unscheduled absence. 3rd violation this month. Less than 10 minutes later, Catherine Pierce, regional director, entered the store. Gray suit, sharp black heels, each step like a pin pricking the marble floor. Julian saw her lean in and murmur to the morning shift manager, "Washington's been flagged." Unplanned absences are trending up. Nexus recommends cutting her hours by 40% next week. Follow the protocol. There was no malice in her voice. It was eerily devoid of feeling like reciting the error code of a failing dishwasher. Julian returned to aisle 7. Maya was restocking cereal boxes, her hands moving constantly, but her eyes drifting somewhere far away. Another employee passed by and said something jokingly. Maya forced a smile, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "I just got my weekend hours cut at the cafe too," she whispered after the other employee left. "Probably because Nexus flagged me as inflexible. But Alzheimer's isn't flexible. It doesn't wait for your schedule." That sentence, "Alzheimer's isn't flexible," pierced through the armor of data Julian once believed to be unbreakable. He went back to the monitor again. Another screen. A 7-day performance graph. a subtle downward slope. Below it, a line of automated recommendations: increase shift pressure, voluntary attrition probability at optimal threshold. Julian froze. This wasn't a system glitch. It was by design. Every phone call, every sigh, every 90-second absence from a station was being tracked, analyzed, quantified. No one screamed. No one was directly fired. But one by one, people like Maya were being worn down until they disappeared. A war. No blood. No bullets. No formal accusations. Just color-coded charts and fading smiles. Julian stood motionless, gripping the mop handle, as if letting go would cause the entire world he had built to come crashing down. The employee break room at Aura Market sat just behind the storage area right next to the tech room. Small and closed, lit by dull fluorescent bulbs, and always faintly smelling of burnt coffee. Julian stepped in, carrying 2 lattes from the automated barista machine. Maya was sitting alone at the corner table, her sketchbook wide open in front of her. No one would have guessed the checkout girl had such depth in her drawings, an elderly woman under a warm lamp, her eyes suspended between present and past. A frail hand holding a soup spoon, as if it were the last thing she remembered how to use. Julian sat down and slid 1 cup toward her. "What are you drawing today?" he asked, his voice light, as though it were just a co-worker's idle curiosity between shifts. Maya looked up, slightly startled, but then offered a weary yet polite smile, a survival reflex. "A portrait of my mother," she answered softly. "She used to teach art. Now, every day I have to remind her who I am." Julian didn't respond right away. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled sheet, a child's messy drawing. He made up a story: "My little brother's autistic. He used to draw like this. My mom covered the fridge with them. Every time I feel like giving up from stress, I look at this." Maya paused. Her eyes suddenly turned clear, as if every layer of defense had been peeled back one by one. And then, without warning, she started to talk. Not fast, not dramatic, just fragments spilling out, tired, helpless, afraid. "My mom has good days and bad days. Sometimes I'm talking to her, and she asks if I'm her sister. I have to pretend, because if I tell her the truth, she panics." Her voice trembled, but a sharp light flickered in her eyes, a quiet fury long suppressed. "I asked to switch shifts to be flexible, but Nexus didn't accept the reason. The system flagged me like I was a threat. I wasn't fired. No one fired me. But my hours got cut and my responsibilities grew. No one told me to leave, but every day I feel like I'm being squeezed a little more." Julian stayed silent. Maya looked down at her hands, her voice lowering into something darker, an accusation spoken by the victim herself. "That's not a support system. It's a press. It's built to push me to the edge, and then wait for me to fall." She looked up straight at him, not knowing she was speaking to the man who created that very system. "It's programmed to avoid blame. No termination letters. Just people like me forced to choose between our dignity and our devotion." Julian couldn't speak, couldn't smile, couldn't offer comfort. His hand curled slowly into a fist on the table. This was no longer a sad break room story. This was an indictment from someone crushed by a monster he had built. The room thickened into stillness. 2 people sat in silence. One because she had lived too long in fear. The other because for the first time he heard the cry for help he had coded his system to ignore. Night fell like a heavy velvet curtain. Julian sat hunched in a pay-by-the-hour rental room near the industrial zone where the pillow smelled of bleach, and the curtains were so thin that neon light from the car wash across the street seeped in all night long. In front of him was his old laptop plastered with stickers that once seemed cool: code hard, sleep rare, and zero latency, zero mercy. Once slogans of pride, now they just felt stupid. He logged into the Nexus system using the highest level administrator access. The screen lit up with the authentication line. "Welcome back, architect." Julian swallowed hard. He typed in Maya Washington. Her profile loaded portrait photo work history logs of irregular station absence charts, tracking fluctuating performance metrics. A blinking orange indicator appeared. Attrition probability 76%, likelihood of voluntary resignation. Below it, the system's suggestions: increase schedule pressure, coefficient 1.2, lower priority for flexible shift allocation. Disable internal support channels, automatically executed. Julian felt the air thinning around him. He scrolled further, and then a list appeared. Hundreds of names. Just a small fraction of the employees were flagged across the country. Each entry came with a profile photo, job role, and the reason they were marked. Rachel M. Cashier in Houston missed 3 shifts to attend her sister's funeral. Thomas B., a warehouse worker in Ohio, lost focus after a car accident left his wife paralyzed. Angelica T., single mother of 2 in Detroit, flagged as lacking commitment for requesting Tuesday afternoons off to take her child to physical therapy. Next to each name, numbers in crimson red: voluntary attrition probability 83%, 91%, 88%. No one had fired them, but Nexus had cleared the path for them to quietly disappear. Julian's hand trembled as he hovered over an email. Subject: HR Risk Containment. Q3. Sender: Catherine Pierce. Nexus continues to demonstrate exceptional efficiency in reducing personnel costs by encouraging self-selection out of non-optimal individuals. It remains our most effective tool in maintaining the industry's lowest involuntary termination rate. Julian read the final line 3 times. His eyes didn't blur. They burned. Success, Catherine called it success. He shot up, nearly knocking over the chair. When he created Nexus, he thought he was building a fair playing field. But all he'd really done was construct a machine of indirect dismissal, dressed in moral robes and hidden behind clean data. He didn't need condemnation. Not from the public. Not from the press. He only needed to open his eyes and face the truth. He had programmed the pain. He had coded compassion into a system error. Julian shut the laptop, but the numbers didn't vanish from his mind. They remained, blinking, screaming. You thought you were saving the world, but you've turned it into a soulless Excel sheet. He bowed his head, hands covering his face. For the first time, Julian Croft, multimillionaire CEO architect of Nexus, no longer believed in himself. 8 a.m. Monday morning. Aura Market gleamed as it always did. Customers entered with bright smiles, soft music playing, and the familiar golden lighting casting perfect shadows across every corner of the aisles. But something felt off. A sleek, black sedan pulled up at the front entrance. From it stepped a tall man, upright posture, navy-tailored suit, fitting him flawlessly, silk tie knotted tight. No one recognized him until Catherine Pierce caught sight of the figure. All the blood drained from her face. Julian Croft. No longer Jay the janitor, but the founding CEO, now standing at the entrance of the very store he had designed, down to every centimeter of the customer experience. Every tile, every soundtrack, every touchscreen interface bore his imprint. The entire store fell silent, as if someone had hit a mute button. Julian stepped inside, his voice low but commanding. I'd like all employees to pause their work for 10 minutes. Please gather at the frozen food section. Yes, right now. No one dared object. Catherine gripped her notebook tightly but said nothing. Julian scanned the room. His gaze passed over Maya, over every employee, the same people he once labeled as data points. I'm Julian Croft, and today I'm not here as your CEO. I'm here as the one responsible. He turned to Catherine. She stood still, chin tilted slightly as always, but her chest rose and fell with visible unease. Catherine, you're one of the highest performing regional directors in the company. Please would you share with everyone here what has the Nexus system brought to Aura Market, a trap laid? And Catherine had no way out. Nexus is a tool of innovation. She began, voice slightly shaky but measured. It helps us optimize resources, ensures employees are utilized efficiently, and removes operational bottlenecks. Data doesn't lie. It helps us maintain objectivity. A young employee standing near Maya furrowed his brow. Another clenched their fist. No one spoke, but the air thickened. Julian remained still. He nodded, then turned to Maya. Thank you, Catherine. Now, Maya, if you don't mind, would you share with everyone how performance and data have affected your work and your life? Maya stood frozen. Then slowly, she stepped forward, shoulders squared, no longer avoiding the moment. The store fell dead silent. Catherine faltered. For the first time, she felt like she was standing in a real courtroom, not one governed by corporate policies, but by the people she had labeled as non-compliant variables. Julian stepped back, ceding the spotlight to Maya. There was no CEO now, no director. Only the truth standing in a cashier's uniform, about to say what no algorithm could ever suppress. Maya stood in front of the freezer aisle, the cold light behind her reflecting off her faded uniform. But when she spoke, her voice carried an unexpected warmth. I don't know how to speak in front of a crowd. I only know how to smile when customers forget to say thank you. She paused, took a breath. Julian didn't move. Catherine stared down at her notebook, but could no longer write a single word. When the system labeled me inflexible, it didn't know that my mother only remembers who I am on Tuesday afternoons. It didn't know I had to switch shifts just to sit beside her for 5 final minutes before the sedatives kicked in. Maya's voice didn't waver. It wasn't loud, but it rang out as clear as a bell in an empty chapel. Nexus measures performance in seconds, but it can't measure the worth of a held hand or the final glance before a mother forgets her daughter's name. A sharp inhale rose from the gathering staff. Maya turned her gaze to Catherine. I'm not lazy. I'm not irresponsible. I'm just human. Silence fell again. Then Julian stepped forward, his voice low and crisp like a lock snapping open. Thank you, Maya. He turned to the employees, his gaze no longer sharp like in press conferences, but tired and more sincere than ever. Nexus was built with the right idea, but it became the wrong tool, and that failure is mine. Catherine opened her mouth to respond, but Julian raised a hand. Effective immediately, the Nexus system is suspended indefinitely. All decisions regarding scheduling, rewards, and HR matters will be transferred to a committee run by you. All eyes followed him, but he wasn't done. This committee will have full access to the system, transparent oversight, and the authority to redefine how we work based on people, not just data. He looked at Maya, this time not as a CEO to an employee, but as a man to the person who helped him find his moral compass again. I'd like to invite Maya Washington to serve as chair of this committee. No one clapped right away. They were still too stunned. Until one voice rose, Mr. Joseph, the longtime stockroom keeper, she deserves it. Then another, and another. And suddenly the entire store erupted. Maya stood motionless. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks, but she did not break. Julian turned to Catherine. You will be suspended. During that time, you'll work directly with the committee. Your task will be to relearn what you've forgotten how to listen. No anger, no triumph, just justice not to punish but to heal. One employee hugged Maya, another pulled out their punch card and tore it in half. We start over, together. And Julian simply stood back, receding from the moment, as if this victory no longer belonged to him, but to them. 3 months later. On the second floor of Aura Market, once just a storage space for excess inventory, now stood the Wellness and Human Development Room, filled with natural light greenery, beside light wood meeting tables, and a whiteboard no longer used to display KPIs, but to capture ideas. Maya Washington sat at the head of the table, no longer in a cashier's uniform. Today she wore a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled up, her hair tied high. In front of her were personnel files and a schedule proposal submitted by the staff themselves. No one shouted, no one cried, but every eye in the room turned to her with genuine respect. Catherine Pierce was also present, not at the head of the table, not speaking, not interrupting. She was listening, carefully, taking notes. Occasionally she nodded slowly. The firmness was still there, but now it was a firmness that listened. Julian stood by the coffee counter holding a recycled paper cup. No tie. No commanding CEO stare. He didn't need to speak. He simply looked at Maya, then at the others, and knew that Aura Market had finally found its true light again. On the wall behind Maya hung a small bronze plaque fastened with 4 plain screws. Dignity before data, no sparkle, no fanfare. But everyone in that room knew every letter was forged from blood tears and the courage of those once labeled as risk variables. The meeting ended with a gentle round of applause. Then everyone returned to work, but no longer as silent cogs in a machine. They returned as people seen, heard, and human. As Julian prepared to leave, Maya approached him. She didn't say much. She simply handed him a drawing, a janitor standing between 2 towering aisles, light from the ceiling shining down like an open door. "I kept this sketch," she said. "Sometimes, to change a system, you have to start by mopping its floor." Julian laughed, a light, relieved laugh he couldn't remember the last time he'd had. He nodded. No need for a speech, just a world rewritten by the very hands it once overlooked. Have you ever been judged by a number? Have you ever hidden your pain just to keep a smile for a customer? The story of Maya and Julian reminds us technology can be powerful, but it should never be allowed to replace human dignity. If you believe that people must come before data, leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for Toch Story, where we share stories that awaken conscience and touch the heart. Because the world needs more just systems, and it begins with your story.